So how many people in the crowd have used Windows 8? Played with it. Even just played with the Surface in the store. What do you think? So-so. What do you think? Not very user-friendly. Yeah, I get it. Anybody else play with it? Anybody like it? A couple people like it? All right. How many people have done development on Windows 8? For Windows Store apps? Oh, okay. Windows 8 is Windows 7 with a bunch of little itty-bitty, extremely important changes underneath, and one huge, ginormous change in front of the user. And that's the start screen. Now, the start screen is cool if you have a touch-enabled device. In fact, it's extremely cool if you have it. And this is mine, so if something really off-color shows up, I'm sorry. It's extremely cool if you have a touch-enabled device. If you have a mouse and a keyboard, you'll probably never use it. And that's okay, because all you have to do is go to the desktop, and it runs just like a Windows 7 box. But I'm not here to sell Windows 8. Frankly, I use Linux half the time as my desktop machine. So I'm not particularly sold on it. What we're going to talk about, we're at a security conference, right? What we're going to talk about is how this affects all of you from a security perspective. Because there are things about Windows 8 and Windows 8 app development that very few people know and nobody's really talking about. And I'd like to give you all an opportunity to see a couple things that I've discovered. I've been writing Windows 8 apps quite literally since the day it launched. I started on a project with Intel called Digital Mementos. You can look it up. It's a sample app in their cloud product. The day that the developer edition dropped in September of 2011, worked on that project for almost a year, and then since then I've written American Airlines Windows 8 app, which is still in testing right now and should be out in a couple months, hopefully. I am a developer by trade. Well, here let's talk about this. Now that you know what we're talking about, let me tell you who I am real quick. I am first and foremost a husband and father. My family's over at Nemo doing the Science Museum thing. I am also an author. I write for Wiley. The last book I did was it's saved as a text file, so I'm not going to bring up the picture. But it's securing. Oh no, that's the thing. Okay, I just must not have moved it over. Windows 8 Application Development for Dummies is the last book that I wrote, where we talked about how to get started in Windows 8 application development, pieces like that. I'm a software composer by trade. I actually got that line from a book called Lorem Ipsum, which I would recommend to anybody who is interested in computer science. It's a kid's book about computer science, and frankly, it taught me more than 8 years of college did in about 170 pages. So I recommend you go and grab it. But the concept of a software composer in the book is somebody who or a composer in general, is someone who takes pieces and puts them together in such a way to make something more beautiful than the original pieces were. And that's really what I've been doing for the past 20 years. I'm a lumberjack by necessity, at the odd predilection of having a house that's fueled by wood deep in the bowels of Ohio in the United States. I am a home brewer. I didn't bring any with me. As it turns out, they don't like it when you bring kegs of beer on the plane. I don't know why, but for whatever reason. I am also a lockpicker. I'm the administrative director of Locksport International. If anybody wants to talk lockpicking, I'm more than willing to chat about it, but that's not what this talk's about, so we'll do it another time. You hear developers call themselves ninjas all the time. I am not a development ninja, but I am actually a ninja. I'm 5th Q in Bansen Shukai Ninjutsu. Very much enjoy the martial arts. Something of an insurrectionist. I have a real bad habit of saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right time and getting myself in trouble. But that makes me a better software composer, really, if you think about it. And I've become something of an honorary blue teamer in Columbus. The security community sort of adopted me because of the Locksport connection. And because I have so much experience in the development world, and I have been granted so much knowledge in the security world by attending wonderful events like Black Hat, I've kind of become the developer amongst the security people in our local community. I'm very glad I can make the trip over here and share some of this stuff with you. All right, let's talk about Windows 8 development. You can build a Windows 8 store app 3 ways. There are actually all the same apps you're used to developing in Windows 7 or before, you can develop in Windows 8. For instance, .NET is still extant. You can build ASP.NET MVC applications that run on Windows 8. Of course, they're designed to run on Windows Server. As far as the machine itself, you can still write Windows Forms apps if you want to. You can write WPF applications if you'd like. About the only thing that's kind of gone is Silverlight. And the reason is because Silverlight sort of became Windows 8 store applications. Now, the store applications are different. We were talking about these wonderful apps here, and you can see how some of these apps just have a boring little logo like Visual Studio, and some of these apps have a nice active tile like Discourse here. The difference between all of those is that some of them are designed as Windows Store apps. Why isn't my machine connected to the internet? The hell, I'm not connected to the internet. Okay. Oh, all right, well, we won't look at the store right now. That's fine. Windows Store apps are developed using a completely different API and a completely different style of development than WPF or ASP.NET applications. The new API is called WinRT, and we'll look at it a lot. Basically what it is it's an object-oriented Win32. All the same stuff that you're used to seeing in Win32, except you see it in a very object-oriented fashion. If you want to get access to cryptography, instead of loading up some obscure DLL and calling some method you had to look up in a book, you type windows.security.cryptography, and you get access to it. Okay? I'm not going to do a training on Windows 8 development here, but I do want to tell you about how you can build them. First, you can build them using C++ and XAML, but you can actually use DirectX if you so choose. This is primarily for game development. It doesn't have much in the way of security surfaces, and I don't talk about it very much. It also has the additional problem of I don't know C++ very well. In fact, I don't have the correct libraries loaded, apparently, for this application, but that's okay. You can still write in .NET. .NET is not dead just because WinRT came out. However, .NET is just, as .NET 4.0, just basically wrapped Win32 for its machine-level functions. .NET 4.5 in the Windows Store battery of libraries wraps WinRT. So really, you're still building a WinRT app, but it feels a lot like Silverlight. So if you have existing Silverlight talent in-house or existing Silverlight or WPF applications, they make very easy migration to Windows Store apps in C# and XAML. Additionally, if you have existing business logic coded in .NET, you can convert it to a WinMT application or WinMT component and then integrate it into any Windows Store application. So that's handy. But there's something you should know that makes the security surface of this piece much smaller. There's a lot, like about 70%, you can't do in .NET or in anything that speaks to WinRT. For instance, there is no access to sockets. You cannot connect to a socket on another machine unless you go through the pre-existing system.net.web or the XML HTTP response classes in JavaScript, which we'll get to in a second. You cannot connect to a SQL Server database because of that, because you can't get to 1433. You can only get to 80 and 443, and that's it. No email, no SQL Server, no fancy WCF on port 3387, or, well, that's a bad example, but you know what I mean. It makes for some really interesting pieces. You can't touch the file system in WinRT. So all of the system.file stuff pretty much doesn't work in .NET for Windows Store apps. It's just not there. If you go looking for a way to write a file or make a file into a bit stream, it's just gone because you can't touch the file system. You can touch discrete parts of the file system that WinRT lets you touch, but you can't just save something in your program files folder from an application anymore. The code just doesn't exist. If you try to pull in a DLL, it'll just fail and compile. So while .NET is here, and it's still, for those of you who are Silverlight friendly, it still looks a lot like what you're used to. There's a nice designer. The XAML looks about the same as it did before. The designer is really taking its sweet old time there. See, there's the designer. And we can run the application. And there. If you had your record collection ready, we could load it in there and have a record collection application submitted to the store. Done. Which is another piece that I'd like to point out about Windows Store application development versus Windows 8 or traditional Windows development. They've made it the bar to entry really low. There are built in these really nice grid-driven templates, but downloadable online, there are hundreds of approved templates that are store-ready for everything from data collection applications to games to anything you could come up with, really, travel applications. Any kind of mashup you want, there's pre-existing pieces of this. What this means is that no matter whether your company's developers are being tasked with building your organization's Windows 8 or Windows Store application, or your people are bringing their apps or bringing their Windows RT devices and saying, hey, I want to run these on your network, you have to understand that while the rigor for testing is high, the barrier to entry is low. So there's a tremendous amount of crud out there in the store, a lot. Even more by percentage than you would expect looking at the iTunes Store, for instance, or Google Play. There's a lot of stuff that's just basically scraping a website and presenting it in Windows 8 format. So that kind of brings us to what we're here to actually talk about today, which is security. Oh, wait, hang on. I didn't show you the point of all this in just a second. So we can write in C++ over WinRT. We can write in C# over .NET using WinRT, both using XAML. But there's something even more interesting, and that's the new first-class citizen in Windows development, which is, yep, you guessed it, JavaScript. HTML5 and JavaScript are now first-class citizens in Windows because the 10-year prevention of Microsoft bundling IE with the browser had expired. Now it's bundled with the operating system. I mean, for real. This screen is rendered with IE's rendering engine. Okay? If you write a Windows 8 Windows Store application using JavaScript and IE10, it is using IE's rendering for HTML and the Jakarta engine to compile and runtime the JavaScript. All right? So IE is the core of this, and my casual survey of how this is put together is showing me that about 75% of the applications that are developed for Windows Store are developed using JavaScript. Microsoft will tell you it's 50-50, but it isn't. It isn't because, one, it's much easier to write in JavaScript. JavaScript and WinRT are tied together very tightly by a special library called WinJS that we'll get to see a little bit of in some of the demos. It makes it really easy to build applications. If you have existing code written for your public web or your intranet or whatever in JavaScript, using jQuery, using Knockout, it doesn't matter. It'll all just run. Anybody played Cut the Rope? The game Cut the Rope? Oh, you're kidding, really? Is that just a US thing, or are you guys just asleep already? I know it's after lunch, so everybody's snoozing now. They should have coffee in the back instead of water. So Cut the Rope was originally an HTML game. And a friend of mine who worked on me with me on the Intel and American projects, Adam Kinney, he was tasked with actually converting it to a Windows 8 application for demonstration at build. And to do that, he quite literally copied the code from ViewSource in the browser, pasted it into Visual Studio, and pushed the run button. And the whole game came to life as a Windows 8 application. That's how good it is. Now, no matter what you think about JavaScript or HTML or using IE10 to run applications within a Windows infrastructure, the fact is it's pretty good, it's pretty fast, and it's going to be used. There are already 70 million installed licenses for Windows 8 and 150 million app purchases already. And it's not even been 6 months yet, has it? So no matter what you think about it, it's going to be a reality on your networks for two reasons. One, your company, if you work for a large public company, if you're a security consultant, this might not apply to you, but if you work for the enterprise, to use a loaded term, Your organization will eventually come to you and say, hey, I need you to look at this Windows Store application we built that looks just like our iPad and Android application so that we can put it up in the store. For one thing, Microsoft is spending a lot of money getting companies involved. And for another thing, with this many people using it, it's going to be a reality eventually. Number two, people are going to want to bring their own Windows RT devices onto your network and use them. Okay? And there are security considerations left, right, and backwards with all these applications. I will show you, well, all of them I have found over the course of this talk. And let's start with one that's really interesting, actually. So in Windows 8, you can see my ugly, well, you can't really see it that well, but my ugly mug's up there in the corner. It says Bill Sempf. When you load up your iPad, you log in with your iTunes account, right? When you load up your iPad, you log in with your, no, I said that already. Your Android device, you log in with your Google Play account or your Gmail account, really. I remember that was, well, I first got a Nexus 1. It says, what's your Gmail? I typed it in. It said, all right, give me a second. All right, good, you're ready to go. And I was coming off Windows Mobile as a platform. All my contacts, calendar, task, everything all synced up, ready to go, done. Took me 2 minutes. I was blown away. Microsoft is replicating that experience, or trying to. If you use Microsoft products, they want to make that same kind of tie-in that Google is making. So what's that mean? That picture and that account, that's my Microsoft account. The same account that used to be called Passport and was called the Windows Live account is now called the Microsoft account, and that's how you log in to a Windows 8 device. You do not make your own local account, and if you want to connect to a domain, you have to jump through hoops. That's not really true. There has to be some enterprise management if you want to connect to a domain. A device, a Windows RT device, like a Surface or the Acer tablet, whatever it's called, the Iconia or whatever it is. Those WinRT devices, which are going to start to show up, you log in with your Microsoft account. Why is that of interest to you? If you're in the enterprise and you have devs, they probably have two Microsoft accounts, a personal one and then one they use for work to access things like MSDN or TechNet, right? So if they log in to their WinRT device they bring to work, which account are they going to use? What's the privacy considerations? How much information do we have access to here? Well, the interesting thing is Microsoft is pushing very tightly for more integration with the Microsoft account, not less. So in reality, you can use a nice freely downloadable library called Windows Login to connect your application to the user's Windows login, Windows account, Microsoft account information just for free, effectively. It comes with the tool set. So let's take a look at what it looks like here. So we're going to wait for some asynchronous calls, and then it's going to hopefully come back. Tell me that my internet is dead now after all of this. Really? Doesn't look like it's dead. It looks like it's there. Oh, really? Jeez. When you make a request in Windows 8 to access something over the internet, which is about the only way you can do things, Microsoft requires that any transaction that's going to take longer than 50 milliseconds be handled asynchronously. In fact, in .NET 5 or C# 5.0, that was the only major change that was made in the language. There was a couple of small tweaks, but really the only thing that was made better to work with is they took threading out of the asynchronous model for C#. There are no more callbacks. You just use async and await. The JavaScript world is very similar. They used an existing JavaScript standard, which name escapes me, for a very standards-driven asynchronous experience in using asynchronous calls in JavaScript. So when you make a call to something, it will return. It will expect 3 functions that it can call on return. So I get to use .then after my call. Here's my call, wl.api, .then. And it's going to give me 3 functions. There's actually a third one I could have added there that is for progress. If there's some progress feed, for web services, it doesn't give you a lot, but if you're doing something internally, doing something with the camera or rendering something or waiting for audio to save or something like that, it will give you some response feedback, but that's neither here nor there. And then you can just access the results inside the function parameter return. And if this would have run, which I'm going to give it one more quick try just to see if, maybe I should disconnect and reconnect from the network real quick to see if that's my problem. Because this worked very nicely about 12 minutes ago. So we will give it another try here. When it returns, that response object is, well, if it ever comes back, is going to be a JSON packet with everything in their Windows account that we have asked for. Now, does the product ask you if you ask the user if they want to make that information available to this application? Absolutely, it does on install, and then never again. Now, of course, we all know that readers read those warnings every time they install applications, right? So it's no big deal. They're going to look and say, why does this need access to my calendar? I don't need my contact list. This app doesn't need my contact list. I'm not installing it. Users do that every day. No, they don't. And what's worse, they forget because it only asks one time. If you are in a position where people are bringing their own device and then logging out of their personal and logging into their company Microsoft account, this is a consideration for you. There's no awesome way to test this if people bring their own device. Now, if you're using WinRT corporate in a corporate setting or even just Windows 8 Enterprise, you have the ability to control what apps get installed on any machine. So you can vet the apps. You actually can set up with a private store that you can use that only your apps will go in. And that will make it so that you can vet the apps that people can install. But if they bring their own, they have a lot of control. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Let's look a little bit at something else that has an interesting security surface. And that's declarations and capabilities. So when you develop for any mobile device these days, that application resides in a sandbox. The sandbox has to ask for certain things from the operating system and from the user. iOS, Android all have this feature. Windows RT and Windows 8 is no different for store apps. The first is things it needs to ask the user to use. Sorry, this is so small. There's no easy way to make this bigger. And that's capabilities. Capabilities are things that it needs to ask the user for permission to do. And this is actually implemented extremely well. Not only does it list it in the store so that you can see it before you even click the try or buy button, it also gives you requests it every time the application is run. So for instance, in this little app here, we've selected the webcam as a capability. And what we're going to do is, we're going to use Windows Media Capture to go get a picture. And as you can see, it didn't bother to ask, just because that's the way my day is going these days. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. If we turn it off, it blocks it. Okay. Interesting thing, it actually says we can change it in the app settings as if the user had turned it off, but since I turned it off in the manifest, that option wouldn't even show up. Yeah, I haven't played with it enough to know that how that shows up at the user side, if the user sees that, because I'm obviously running it from Visual Studio. The key with capabilities is least privilege, okay? There are a lot of features here and gives the app a lot of access to things. From the perspective of developing, if you're developing an app internally for publication, okay, and you're reviewing it from a security side, you want to make sure that your application uses as few of these capabilities as humanly possible. Speaking as a developer, it is our habit to click everything and turn it on in order to get to the point where our application works as expected, and then we just leave them on forever because that's the easiest thing to do. Instead, what you want to do is start with nothing and turn things on one at a time until the app works. That's a key part of any mobile development, and it's just as true in Windows 8 as it's true in iOS or Android. There are two capabilities that are of specific interest. The first is Documents Library. And it even says this capability is subject to store policy. If you select the Documents Library, you're going to go to the security team when you submit your store app for testing to Microsoft. Submit your store app to Microsoft for testing. The reason is because you can any app, any WinRT app, can read from and write to the Documents Library. This gives you the ability to move things from other parts of the machine into the Documents Library, which almost no app will ever need to do. Not something you want to turn on and let somebody else play with, right? From your app side. You don't want to be dealing with that. The other one is enterprise authentication. If you are publishing something to the store, you do not ever need that. That is really just for building internal Windows 8 applications that are going to need to read Active Directory state. All right? So while people will think, oh, wait, I want people to be able to use this app if they're logged onto their domain, that's not what it's for. And there's a lot more information about them on MSDN, but you as the security consultant needs to know what these are for so that you can direct the devs, because they're not going to check. They're just going to push checkboxes until their app works. All right? Declarations are the opposing side of this piece. Oh, sorry, I'm still running. If you look, this is Contoso Cookbook. This is Microsoft's demo, their main demo app. If you look at their app manifest, go look at declarations. You see they declared themselves as a search target. What declarations are is your application telling the operating system what it needs. Okay? So capabilities are your application asking the user for permission to use features of their device. Declarations are your application telling the operating system what you'll support. The reason for this is that Microsoft is attempting to do something that really no other app does well. No other store does well, rather. Google kind of does it, but you know when you're in Android and you take a picture and you can go say share and it'll list your Twitter applications to share from? Microsoft has made that a global feature. You don't have to code for that in your application anymore. You simply declare yourself as a share target and down here. And you can your app will show up anytime somebody shares. So say you're writing a Twitter appliance that does something special. You can declare yourself as a share target. And then when the user uses the charms bar off here to the side, you see that share tag? And they click on share, nothing to be shown because you can't share from the desktop. But if you choose to share from there, then whatever that app is sharing, your app will show up if you accept that kind. So if we start from Internet Explorer and say share, your Twitter app would show up because Internet Explorer is sharing a hyperlink and you accept hyperlinks. That contract is declared as part of the declarations in here. Now, I am a huge fan of using contract-driven development in Windows 8 applications. I think it makes your application better all around. If I go to search and type quiche, Q-U-I, and then Q-U-I-C-H-E, and then click on Contoso, and I did that from Visual Studio. So do you see where I'm coming from here? It's making it so the apps, even if they don't know anything about each other, can work together. I'm a fan of that. I think that's powerful. And if your app shows up as a share target, every time a user swipes over and uses that share button, every time the user swipes over and uses that search button, every time the user swipes over and uses the device button to try to play to something or send a video somewhere or something like that, your app will show up. I'm in favor of that. However, least privilege applies here too. If you say you're a share target, you better darn well have the code in and have it working well. Evernote is a great example of how not to do this. If you've got Windows 8, unless they just updated it, go try Evernote and try to share to it. It bombs in extraordinarily unique ways. So that's something else that should be in your application review, reviewing those declarations for pieces here. For reading declarations as a security service. All right, let's talk about storage quickly so we get through everything. So I told you can't touch the file system. And I got some raised eyebrows. So Microsoft, excuse me, Microsoft gave the developer two cool things, actually really one cool thing with two sides to it, places to put their stuff. Because you can't write an app without putting your stuff. If you're going to write Pong for Windows 8, you're going to have to store the high score somewhere. You know, in the old days, we'd store them in a web app, we store them in cookies, right? Or on the server, if we've got accounts. In a regular Windows app, maybe we'd have an INI file or a settings file or a config file that we'd update using the file system. Oh, wait. We can't do that in Windows Store apps. How short our memory is. Yeah, so what do? Well, awesomely enough, Microsoft gave us this wonderful thing called windows.storage.application data. Amazing class, it really is. It's a namespace, I should say. It gives you the ability to do all kinds of things with your app's data. From your perspective, though, it's pretty scary. So there's two kinds of application data that you can do. The first is you can do roaming. Well, the first is really local settings, but we're going to start with roaming settings. I think roaming settings is awesome. When they started talking about this at Build, they'd say, "Hey, look what you can do. You can save the state of your game on your Windows on your desktop machine. When you pick up your laptop and load up the application, bang! The place you left off of the game is there." Okay, wait a minute. You mean we save the settings and it just shows up on another device? How is that humanly possible? Use roaming settings. How does that work? You don't need to worry about it. Okay, so we look into this, and I am not a Wireshark guru, so I'm not going to demo this live. I'll show you how the app works real quick that I used. But this is literally all you have to do. You get a copy of the roaming settings and just save a value. It's just like saving to a cookie. It's really very straightforward. So I went and looked, and so I ran this application. I went and looked, and do I have the right app up? Yeah, I do. I went and looked at the PCAP setup, and oops, it's TLS encrypted, which is good, and it's OAuth authenticated, which is also good. I have not yet. Like I said, I'm not really a Wireshark guru. I haven't yet played man in the middle and figured out what the pieces look like, but I'm going to show you the other settings in a minute just to panic you further. The latest lookup, fortunately, shows that stuff is being saved out to Microsoft in Azure. That's an Azure address up here, which is good and bad. Because if you've written an application that stores any amount of personal information and your terms of service say that you don't store it outside of Europe, you have no control where this is going at all. There's no options on the remote settings class. You just set a value, and then it goes somewhere. Yes, it is encrypted in transport. I can tell you that much. But that's it. This is a real serious concern for you if you haven't, because developers are going to use the crap out of this. It's awesome. I've used it in every app I've written. It is the most amazing thing. It really is. It's so much easier than even the .NET stuff that's out there. It's brilliantly designed, but where the heck's it going? Even more worrisome, when I originally did this research, this was the IP number it was going to. How's that net name look to you? Wait, what? Google? Where is storing it in Google? And it was like that for a month. And now finally the IPs are pointing to Azure. So literally you have no clue where this is going. And that's something to think about. So there's remote settings. You would imagine there's probably a local settings, and you would be right. So like I said, I haven't man in the middle of the packets that are going back and forth to remote settings, but I'm figuring that local settings, remote settings are probably using the same file management mechanism, right? So we'll go look at this. Did I press the right button there? Good. And then we'll run process monitor. Yeah, sure. Is it running? Okay, that's good. Okay. So you can see, for those of you who know, does everybody know process monitor probably? It shows you everything that's going on the machine. Runs great on Windows 8. I have locked down the process named the WWA host. That is the app that runs Windows 8 apps. Okay, there's the application, the executable that runs Windows 8 apps under the covers in a regular Windows 8 box. Windows Store apps. It runs Windows Store apps in a Windows 8 box. And then I have said, hey, only show me write files. And then make sure it's still running. Okay, it is. So we go and run this local storage. I'll show you what it does. It just we're just going to write something to local settings values. Here's local settings. I'm also playing a little bit with local storage, which is a browser tool. I haven't gotten into that, gotten details on that yet, but you can use regular HTML5 storage, like the WebDB and all that stuff. Anything that works in IE10 works in a Windows 8 app. So that's a whole nother bag of beans, but you're probably already looking at that as part of your HTML efforts, and that's fine. But this is new. So if we run this, and we'll just say we'll step past that. We go over to Procmon, and of course nothing's going to show up because that's just the story of my life, right? Man, why can't I get any demos to run today? Okay, there they are. So here's our two write files. So I will go and copy this path, and let's go see what's in there. Oops, sorry. Oops. Just plain Jane XML, folks. So if you're saving credentials, your devs are saving credentials, bits and pieces of information, keys that are specific to their install of the application, they went to the service behind it and got pieces that bring forward, it's just in plain text. And anybody can get to it. And yes, you can change those values and run it, and the application will still run. So storage is a nightmare. Storage is a nightmare. Really, and we've got quite a bit more to get through. Really, the only thing you can do is use your backend services. So we will talk about that a little bit. So that's local storage. So I've got my second page, and I have 20 minutes to get through it. So I went through a couple of the pieces of Windows 8 that are kind of interest from a security surface perspective. Okay, storage is one. The capabilities using Windows accounts to access to do authentication into the Windows 8 device. Now I want to talk a little bit about testing. Okay. Because that's going to be really where your focus is going to be. You're going to be if you're a security consultant, you're going to be handed a Windows Store app and be told to make sure it's secure. All right. The first thing you're definitely going to want to do is not test the app itself. Believe it or not. And let's use this one for this time. So the first thing we're going to want to do is recognize that the reality of the reality of Windows Store development, which is that there's no databases, no SQL database, Oracle database, anything like that. There's no file system access. Storage that's provided is scary. What people are going to use is services, okay? The problem with using services on an installed application like this is that the stuff you may have depended on with your ASP.NET or Java server pages applications or PSP applications before, some of the data is rendered on the server and presented, and some of the data is called with jQuery and received via jQuery. In these applications, there is no rendering the file on the server. There is no server. It's like you have downloaded an HTML application to your local machine, and it's going to run as it stands. So what that's leading people to do is expose services that were previously internal only, that were maybe a little bit of a security risk because the web server could see them, but they weren't ever exposed to the public as public-facing endpoints, REST endpoints or SOAP endpoints. Does that make sense? Because you need to expose this data that wasn't necessarily ever exposed as a service before, you're going to show new endpoints from your personal business or your business's data to the public so that the store apps can get to it. And since it's only 80 and 443, you don't have the access to make a pipe to something and do something special. It's just as attackable as anything else. So what you need to do is, oh, that's why it's broken. My proxy was still turned on. I should have checked that. Okay, maybe I'll go back and run the other thing so you can see what Windows looks like. You need to go and test the services. And how many people have used Zap to test a web application? Really, no, one person. Are you guys really that asleep? Okay, so Zap is Zed Attack Proxy. How many people use Burp? Ah, there you go. Okay, you're not dead. All right, Zed is a free version of Burp. Okay, Burp is awesome. It is, but it costs money. And Zap is free. So depending upon what you need to do, Zap is an OAuth project that works very nicely, and we like it very much. Let me get rid of these two sites. You know what? Don't worry about it right now. So what we have is we have this little piece over here that I'm going to use to demonstrate something else in a few minutes, but we'll look at it right now. All it's going to do is it's going to make a call out to this Azure websites, this REST service I've written and put on Azure for a client of mine. Okay, it's just a test thing. It just returns a JSON packet. So if we run this, you see here this WinJS.xhr. XHR is Microsoft's asynchronous version of XML HTTP response. Okay, so that's what you have to use inside of these applications. It returns that asynchronous pattern that I told you about before. So that's what we're doing here. I'm only connecting to the first function, the response function, because I'm figuring it's not going to fail, since it's just a static service. So we wait for the service to come back, and we go look at Zap. And here is our service call. Okay? So normally, Zap or Burp sits between the browser and the web server. There is no more browser. Okay? We don't call out to get the HTML anymore. The HTML is saved locally. The JavaScript is local. So the calls you will see is the service calls baked into the application. Those need to be tested just as rigorously or more so as the HTML and JavaScript that the application runs on the machine or C# and XAML. Okay? You cannot avoid this. These will get fuzzed. It's the classic thing that the FUD that we all use. If you don't test it, somebody's gonna. That's what's going to happen here. Just right-click, attack, active scan, and it will sit and attempt to fuzz the service for you. Okay? Works just like anything else. SQL injection, any kind of cross-site injection, cross-site scripting, any pieces like that, all are possible in a service just like they are in a web application. There's no difference. So that's step one of your test plan. That's the good news. The bad news is that everything else, as far as UI testing, right now, pretty much manual. There are no UI testing tools for Windows 8 apps yet that I know of. Telerik is apparently building one that's for QA, and I've actually been tapped to be part of a team to build an open source security testing piece of it, but that's months, if not a year out. So anything else you look for, you have to you're on your own for. What do you test for? I'll tell you what you test for. You test for exactly the same stuff you test for on a web application. Okay? So Microsoft is famous for a couple of things. But one of the things that's really interesting about the company is they've historically been known as a very poor security organization. They don't run their security very tightly. That's obviously changed dramatically in the last 4 years, 5 years, since Windows 7 got stable. And now Windows 8 is extraordinarily difficult to attack as an operating system. The store apps are also rather difficult to attack from an actual rooting the system perspective because of the sandbox they live in, which is why there's none of that in this talk. However, they're just as exploitable as a web application from anything else. So, for instance, you can XSS an application, Crosssite script attack a Windows 8 app just like you could any other application. However, they have the anti-XSS library built into this. Oh, I have my inner text turned on. Hang on just a second. Let me change this. We'll talk about this when we talk about code review. All right. So you probably saw my string there. I'm just sending a basic XSS attack. This is the script tag and like that. The anti-XSS library is baked into Windows Store application deployments. The developer doesn't have to do anything. So the first 10,000 cross-site scripting attacks sitting in XSS or burp, they all fail on this. The 10,000th and one might work. So it's absolutely something you need to test for. I am not a breaker. I am a builder. So my cross-site scripting skills are not elite. And I have not yet broken this. If anyone else can, obviously the one I put in there was just for demonstration purposes, but I've tried all the fancy encoding and stuff like that, and the anti-XSS library catches them all so far. But guaranteed, something will work. I found one that worked in in release preview, but they fixed it when they went gold. Something will work. So the same web vulnerabilities you look for in your websites, you want to look for in your Windows 8 applications. Think about cross-site request forgery and being logged in with your Microsoft account, for instance. Potentials there? Probably. No demos, but probably potentials. SQL injection? Absolutely. JSON injection is the next SQL injection, right? As long as you can make the backend parser do something it's not supposed to do, you have potential for attack. It's some awesome stuff. So the third part of your testing program, first one's test the backend services. Second is test the UI manually right now. Keep your eye out for new testing tools. Third part of your testing regime, code review. Look for the same exact stuff you look for in a web application. Do you ever use inner HTML? No. Use inner text every time. Every time. Inner HTML is where, Inner HTML is where things come from. Now we see, even though I've got something in there, it passes straight through, it encodes everything properly. Encode your inputs, encode your outputs, code review. Do not let them hand you a package file and say, test this. Look at the code. And actually, I'll show you a secret here in a couple minutes. Okay. Let's see if we can get through the next 3 demos real quick. So there's your 3 parts of your testing, 3 parts of your testing piece. Testing your services, testing the UI, code review, the whole piece. WinRT provides some interesting countermeasures. Encryption is baked in. Shouldn't come up with a huge surprise, really. But there is hashing baked in. So Windows security cryptography is a WinRT class. Trying to find a way around the libraries in Win32 with pain. It's much easier now. Works just like you'd expect. There's our hash. There is 2-factor auth baked in as well. Hashing is extraordinarily important because it's the only way you're going to ever be able to authenticate yourself to your backend services. Keep in mind, you're going to have to expose things, like I said before, you hadn't exposed before. So hashing becomes a big part of that. Also know, I'm working on a bcrypt implementation with a couple of other friends from the US. It's on my GitHub. If you go look at GitHub, I've got it up there. It's not working yet. I've got to write a binary encoder in JavaScript. Maybe I'll write it in C#. No, I am writing it in C#, so that won't be as bad as I think. The initial run we did trying to implement bcrypt was 50,000 times slower than a native Windows 8 application. No kidding. It took 5 minutes to encode a password with bcrypt. Not looking good. Hopefully this one will be better, but the initial tests were not so great in JavaScript. Obviously, we're working in C# and .NET. It's going to be a little quicker, but still, real consideration on performance. But at least you know the pieces are in there. We talked about the Windows account, Microsoft account being used. That isn't the only thing you can do. You can also use OAuth. OAuth is actually a first-class citizen in WinRT. No, that's not right. Jeez. Oh, no, yeah, that's not right. Where is it? Ah, here it is. It's in the Windows security class. It's called the Web Authentication Broker. And it actually will take over your app and connect out to Facebook for, it's probably going to error because they don't have a real key in there. But it will act, I didn't code any of this. This is all WinRT doing this for me. So if you're writing an application and you don't want to have to deal with the Windows account nonsense, but you still want users to authenticate, oh, it brings up that's not so bad. You still want users to be able to authenticate, one-line solution, literally, using the Web Authentication Broker, and then let somebody else take care of the accounts without having to deal with the tie-in to Microsoft and all the data that's in there. Let Facebook or Twitter or Google handle it for you. So that's a nice piece baked in that makes things a little bit easier. Oh, and then the final thing. So information disclosure is a huge, huge part of any kind of application testing and secure coding, right? One thing we don't want is the yellow screen of death and ask.net to put the stack trace up there. and you know, we laugh, but we know what happens every day to big companies with lots of money. Well, one of the things I want to try to do was make this fail. So if we go back here, let's turn off our internet for a minute. And then go back to this app, the app we use to show the service call. I don't have time for this. Yeah, I got to show you one more thing after this. So if we run this app now, and you remember what this does, this is just an XHR call out to Azure, right? Notice there was no error handling in my code, right? I just made the XHR call. There's no try catch there, but that's okay. WinJS has me covered. This is extant in .NET as well. It just fails. The app will just fail. See the msapp.terminate app call? It's just going to kill the app. If it runs into an unexpected, unhandled error condition, it just dies. Now, as a developer, very frustrating because you deliver the product, test team calls you, hey, we got it installed, getting things rolling. First bug, hey, I put this in and the app died. What do you mean it died? Did error message or anything? Nope, just died. Because you're not, if you have the error code in the wrong place, it'll just die. From a security perspective, this was awesome because there's ever any spillage of information of any consequence anyway, unless you've written a big error handling routine that spills that out onto the page, which would fall into that code review piece. The only reason why this stopped for us is because we're running it from Visual Studio, and that's what that debugger call will do for us, just like it does in JavaScript in a browser. So there's a couple of countermeasures that I found of interest in WinRT. Hashing and encryption is baked in. OAuth code review, OAuth for authentication to replace maybe the Windows account, Microsoft account, a little bit questionable privacy-wise. And apps just die on unknown, unhandled errors. That's a good thing. So that leaves us with just a few good ideas. First, choose your storage carefully. Remote storage is going who knows where. Remote settings. Local settings is going unencrypted to the hard drive. Scary. Scary stuff. Number two, test your service layers. Your DevOps people will put the services out there and not tell you. It's happened already on a number of assessments I've done. And I'm not even talking with Windows 8 apps, just in general for mobile. Because, well, we want to provide this functionality. Oh, wait, it's internal only. Well, we'll just expose it. those services can be fuzzed just as easily as the web can. Apply least privilege, please. privilege, right? Settings, capabilities, and especially capabilities and declarations. Don't let your developers check all the checkboxes. Don't click all the things. The last piece, code defensively. And this is my last thing, in case somebody's worried about time. D-E-F-E-N-S-I-V-E-L-Y. Code defensively. Why do you need to code defensively? Well, you install an application, right? And you know that it is, it's installed, but where is it and how is it set up and pieces like that? Well, if you go looking, you'll find out that it's just sitting there in the program files directory, sitting in the Windows apps folder. Yeah, you have to give yourself ownership of the folder to do this. But here's every piece. But that's okay, right? It's compiled and encrypted and no big deal. Yeah, no. No. Not so much. Here's the XAML code. Oops. I don't know why it did that. Just a moment here. Yep, there's the XAML. Oh, that's okay. There's a .NET app. It's compiled. Yeah, but it's just you don't have any obfuscation options because it's an auto compile by Visual Studio, so there's no way to obfuscate. You can use .peek and just read their C# code, but it gets worse. And I have again failed to write down which apps use JavaScript apps in case I manage to not find one. Here you go. JavaScript apps, all the code's just sitting there. Every line, every comment, everything uncompiled for anybody to look at. So obviously the implications of this are amazing. I can't even begin to talk about it. Everything from an off-color comment left by some contractor in your code to access to your the app, the secrets that you use to access your underlying services are all just sitting here. And anybody can look at them. So you've got some decisions to make. It's not particularly easy. I don't have a good solution to what to do here, except for to use two-legged auth on your service calls. But aside from that, I mean, honestly, if you go look at the source code for digital mementos up on Intel's site before I knew all this, we're just our app key for Weather Underground. It's just sitting in the source code. Anybody can pick it up and use it for free. I won't lie to you. Because we didn't know that the source code was going to be visible. We thought it was going to be tied up. So anyway, that's the fourth piece of take-homes from this. I hope I'm crushed on time, but I'll hang out here. If anybody has any questions, I want to let the next speaker set up, but I'll hang out over here. Feel free to come ask. I hope you learned something today. Please fill out your evaluation forms. There's an online app, and there's forms in your bag. Please fill them out, not just for me, for everybody. Be honest. I'm at Sempf on Twitter. Feel free to send me your comments publicly. That's wonderful, too. And thank you very much for having me. This has been a real honor. Thanks a lot.